The following program is a production of Truth for the World.
Ye servants of God, your Master proclaim, and publish abroad His wonderful name, the name all victorious of Jesus extol. His kingdom is glorious, He rules over all.
Creation or evolution. So let's start out by looking at the differences. Some of the core differences, if you will, of creation as opposed to evolution. And usually in this lesson, when I say evolution, I'm referring to the general theory of evolution. And I'll explain the other type of evolution or evolution types in just a moment. But just to clarify, I'm speaking about the general theory of evolution. When we look at it from the creation standpoint, Genesis chapter 1 tells us very clearly, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. How did life arise? The material universe came into being through God, and later in that same chapter, God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Obviously, the creation standpoint shows that there is an eternal being, one that was there before the beginning of the universe, and is responsible for the bringing about of the physical universe as well as the living beings that are within it. Colossians chapter 1 and verse 16 says it this way, for by him, referencing Jesus, were all things created, that are in heaven, that are in the earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. So naturally, the idea of creation involves the idea of creator, a being that brought things into existence, a supernatural deity responsible for existence of life. George Gaylord Simpson was an evolutionist, and I think he gave probably the best definition I've ever read of evolution. Notice what he says, evolution is a fully natural process, inherent in the physical properties of the universe, by which life arose in the first place, and by which all living things past or present have since developed divergently and progressively. Contrary to creation, we see that life arose according to the evolutionary definition through the physical properties of the universe and through a fully natural process. Now, hopefully you can see right away the big differences. The physical properties of the universe brought forth life. That's one of the main differences between creation or evolution. Another one is simply limits. Now, I said before, most of the time in this lesson when I'm talking about evolution, I'm talking about the general theory of evolution, the definition of which I basically just read to you, that life arose through the natural processes of the universe, and then they diverged and progressed and became all the different life that you see here. There is a different kind of evolution that I want to mention, and that's called microevolution. This states that small changes can and do occur, but here's the big difference. Those changes have limits. Those changes have limits. In other words, dogs may change and vary in different properties that they have, but there is a limit to how much change they will experience. Now, I want to point out that this is scientifically proven and reproducible in a laboratory. The difference comes in is that creationists will say this microevolution has limits, whereas macroevolution or the general theory of evolution says there are no limits. That those changes can and do occur, but those changes do not have limits. And therein lies the major difference. In other words, they would say that if you add enough time, all those little changes will end up being big changes, and we can explain any life on the planet. Given enough time, the beagle can become the rose, the tomato can become the whale, and the hamster can become the corn. Now, I know that may sound unusual. You may think of evolution, we think about animals, but let's not forget the plant life, shall we? The theory of evolution, by definition, says by which life arose and diverged and progressed. That includes the tree, the corn, the tomatoes, everything. That means when the fish came out of the water, he not only developed lungs in order to become a reptile, but he eventually developed limbs to become the oak tree, because all life came through this process. This is unscientifically proven and unreproducible. We do not have scientific proof that there are no limits to variation. This is what we will refer to as the general theory of evolution. This is, of course, why long periods of time are imagined. That the fact that the dog who lived in a cold environment developed longer fur, if we add 4 billion years, now he will become a bird. All those little changes will eventually add up to big changes. George Wald said it this way, and George Wald was an evolutionist, not just an evolutionist, but a Nobel Prize winner. So a lot of these people, I'm not pulling out quotes from some obscure people that had nothing to do with science. He said, "Time is the hero of the plot. The time with which we have to deal here is of the order of 2 billion years. Of course, this is in 1954. That number may have changed since then. What we regard as impossible on the basis of human experience is meaningless here. Given so much time, the impossible becomes possible, the possible becomes probable, and the probable becomes virtually certain. One has only to wait. Time itself performs the miracles." You think it's going to take a miracle to get a fish to turn into an oak tree? Well, just add time, and the evolutionist says, and you'll get the miracle. Those are the differences that we're going to focus on. Difference in limits, and that's one of the big ones, and differences in how life arose. Now, the idea of creation and the general theory of evolution are incompatible. And a lot of religious groups now subscribe to the general theory of evolution, whereas 20, 30 years ago they would have laughed at it. And one of the ways they try to do that is to say, well, there is evolution, but God used it in order to get us here. We still believe in God, but we still believe in evolution. Well, now you're talking about a fully natural process started by a supernatural being. A fully natural process inherent in the physical properties of the universe started by a supernatural being. Are we not bordering, if not going into supernatural naturalism? Are we not doing atheistic theism or theistic atheism, however you want to put it together? In any case, however you want to look at it, even the evolutionists understand this is not compatible. I find it interesting, the evolutionists that I've read will say these aren't compatible. It's the religious people who are giving in and saying these are compatible. Here's what an evolutionist said. First, there is the theory of evolution in the strict sense. This states that all living organisms have evolved from common ancestors in a gradual historical process of change and diversification. The theory rejects the notion that all organisms were designed and created at the beginning of time. The theory of evolution rejects the idea of a designer and rejects the idea of a creator. What's the impact of this? Does it really matter? Oh, it matters quite a bit. Because your view of origins determine your worldview. We can see that by answering 4 simple questions, basically. Who am I and what am I worth? Well, according to the creation worldview, if you were created by God, and he goes forward to say you're worth more than the world. Your soul is worth more than the world. What would evolution say? Well, you're an accident of nature, and you're therefore nothing special. Who am I? Well, you're either worth more than the world or you're nothing special. Where did I come from? Creation says, obviously you're made by the Creator. Evolution says, well, there was this big bang where nothing exploded and you just happened to assemble yourself together the way you are. Where did I come from? Either the Creator or basically from nothing. Why am I here? Well, the Creator would say, you're here to enjoy life and serve God, right? Ecclesiastes chapter 12, 13 and 14. Enjoy life and serve God. Evolution says there is no purpose to being here. If the universe is an accident, there can be no purpose. Assigning a purpose to an accident means it's no longer an accident. An accident, by definition, has no purpose. And the fourth question, where am I going when I die? Well, obviously, creation says there's a heaven and there's a hell. Evolution says, well, you'll just get recycled, basically. How can we examine evolution so that we understand some of its main flaws and specifically how to talk to other people about it? In thinking about it and talking with people regarding it, you can get lost in a myriad of topics. And one thing I've, in discussion in whatever topic, I've fallen prey to is the one-up treatment. You know, you probably did that a lot when you were kids. Well, I have a new baseball card. Oh, yeah? Well, I have a new toy gun. Oh, yeah? Well, I have a new bicycle. You're just trying to one-up the other person. And sometimes you can do that in religious discussions, whether it be about evolution or anything, and you start just saying, oh, yeah, well, this. Oh, yeah, well, this. And next thing you know, you've gone off on 10 different topics, none of which were resolved. We don't want to get lost in a myriad of topics. We want to look at some core ideas that show evolution is false, and those ideas that can be used when you discuss it with other people. Number one, define your terms. Before you even start talking about evolution, make sure you define micro and macro evolution. That way you understand when you're saying evolution referring to the general theory of evolution and when you're referring to microevolution. Because remember, microevolution is agreed upon. If they want to start arguing that they can go into the laboratory and produce a whole different hybrid of rows, I don't want to argue about that. I believe you. What I disagree is macroevolution, the idea that if you give enough time to that rose, it will turn into a hamster. That's the difference, the limits. But what you have to be careful of is often microevolution is given to you as evidence of macroevolution. And that's not right. But time and again, you're going to be shown evidence of microevolution and you're going to be asked to believe macroevolution. Here it is from USA, or not USA Today, but U.S. News and World Report. Darwin as fit as ever. What evidence is offered to show Darwin is as fit as ever? Northern fruit flies grew larger wings. Is this microevolution or macroevolution? It's microevolution. There's variation within the fly. But according to what this article says, it proves all animals were created through a fully natural process inherent in the physical properties of the universe through which life arose and progressed and diverged. No, it doesn't prove that. It proves that the fly got larger wings. That's all it proves. You see how the bait and switch kind of game is played, or not the bait and switch, the shell game. Here's the evidence of microevolution, but now we want you to believe this other thing over here, macroevolution. Don't let them switch you on that. You'll be shown micro and you'll be asked to believe macro. Define your terms and don't let that shell game switch on you in the discussion. Here it is in a textbook. Evolution means that all inhabitants of Earth are changed forms of living things that came before. Do you see that? One of the top sentences there. What is that? That's macroevolution. But now notice the next sentence. Evolution can be defined as a change in species over time. Well, that's not what you just defined it in the previous paragraph. And now some poor student is going to read that. They're going to play the shell game and give them different definitions of evolution, and they're probably going to go home believing all of it. Define your terms. Agree with micro, but do not allow the evidence for micro to be used as evidence for macro. You want to say a fruit fly got larger wings? Fine, but don't say that that proves we all came from a fish or a macromolecule. That does not prove that one way. The next thing is what I like to call out of gas. In discussing a sports car, you could discuss numerous elements. Imagine people looking at a sports car and going, wow, how much horsepower does it have? How much torque does it have? How many cylinders does it have? How fast do you think it could go? Well, for car enthusiasts, it might be an interesting discussion, right? But how much of that matters if there's no gas in the tank? Doesn't matter at all. If you can't even start the engine, who cares how many how many cylinders it has and how many horsepower it has? It's not going anywhere, and it's not doing anything. Well, what in the world does that have to do with what we're talking about? Similarly, in discussing evolution, you can discuss all these myriad of topics. How adaptation, how much DNA similarity there is between us and other animals, the closest ancestors, time spans, etc. But you know what? That whole evolutionary process doesn't matter if you can't get it started, if there's no gas in the tank. None of that matters if it can't get started. Rather than arguing with somebody about time spans and DNA similarity and all those things, I want to know one thing. How did you get non-living matter to come alive? That's gas. If you can get non-living matter to come alive, that's the gas in the tank to get the whole process started. But I don't want to sit here and discuss a race car if you don't have any gas in the tank. I don't want to discuss an evolutionary process if you can't even get it started, because it's all just moot. You see, evolution is not just about is monkey related to man. Evolution says life arose through fully natural process inherent in the physical properties of the universe. Well, where'd the universe come from if there's no creator? You not only have to get the monkey to turn into man, you have to get the origin of time, matter, and space. Then all that chemical evolution, if hydrogen is the only thing that came from the Big Bang, now hydrogen has to evolve into all those other elements. Then the planets have to evolve. Then life has to evolve. Then all the different major kinds have to evolve. And then finally you get down to microevolution. We always talk about the missing link. Oh, if we could only find the missing link between monkey and man. There's a whole lot more links missing than just monkey and man. You got to explain to me how you got the universe here from nothing. Take me into the laboratory and put nothing in the lab and then bring something out of it, and then I'll start believing in it. Don't tell me about all this evolutionary process if you don't have any gas to get the whole thing started. Take me into a lab and put non-living matter and make it come alive. Show me that. And then I'll believe you have gas in the tank. It's pointless to argue about all these things when you can't get something from nothing. If you think about it, it's a moot point. Doesn't matter. Don't allow yourself to be dragged off into a myriad of topics and questions. Stay on topic. Demand evidence for something coming from nothing or living matter coming from non-living matter. I want to see that. I don't want to discuss DNA similarity and adaptation and all that. I want to see non-living matter come alive. You show me that scientifically proven, then I'll start believing in it. But of course, they won't be able to do that. George Wald, once again, the evolutionist, said, one has only to contemplate the magnitude of this task, i.e. life arising from non-life, to concede that the spontaneous generation of a living organism is impossible. I agree. Yet here we are as a result, I believe, of spontaneous generation. So as an evolutionist, he says, it's impossible to get living matter from non-living matter, but yet that's what I subscribe to. Well, that's your choice if that's what you want to believe, but I appreciate you agreeing with the fact that it's totally impossible to do that. And one more, non-human to human. Evolutionists will claim that humans came from non-human life. I know we can talk about gas in the tank, but this is such a good thing, I think, that really may stump people when you talk with them about evolution, and by making them think about what they really believe. I'm not sure a lot of evolutionists really understand what they really believe. The question is, how do you get a non-human to human? At some point through this, quote, evolutionary process, unquote, you had to have a non-human become human, right? If that's the case, there's only two possibilities. Either one, something that was non-human gave birth to a human, or number two, something was walking around non-human one day and then became human. So when you're talking with someone about evolution, ask them, how did it happen? Did something non-human give birth to a human? Or was somebody non-human walking around one day and suddenly became human? Which one was it? Which one of these is correct? Where's the evidence? Can you reproduce it? Can you scientifically reproduce it in the lab? Can you take something non-human and make it human? It is science. You just left off the word fiction after it. It's science fiction, not science. How did something non-human become human? Did it give birth to a human? Or did it just become human? Because there has to be a line somewhere. If we had non-humans and now we have humans, there's a line somewhere. When did they cross the line? And how did they do it? If something that was non-human became human, or if a human was born from a non-human, with whom did it mate to produce offspring? If a non-human gave birth to a human, who did it mate with to make another human? You see, you not only need one miracle, you need two. At the same time and at the same place. Not only does a non-human have to give birth to a male human, but a non-human has to give birth to a female human. Makes it even more unbelievable. You don't have to focus on how a fish became an oak tree or how a dinosaur became a parakeet. Just focus on how humans arrived. How did life get started? How did humans get here? And don't just give me an idea, show me the evidence. They're not going to be able to do it. And hopefully you'll get them to challenge their own thinking where they say, you know what, this is pretty outrageous. Why am I believing this? Demand evidence that something non-human became human or something human was born from a non-human, and fossils don't count. Don't show me Australopithecus africanus lucy and prove to me that that was a human in transition from a monkey. You know what you learn when you dig up a fossil? You know what you prove when you dig up a fossil? Something died. That's what you proved. Even if it was a transitionary thing between monkey and man, there's no proof that it had children. There's no proof that it had offspring. All you have proof of is that it died. Fossils represent not an evolutionary chain, they represent a moment in time. That's all they represent. So which is the more logical choice? A final way to talk about evolution is define it and its impact. Again, you may find some people who believe in evolution don't even realize the full impact or the definition of what they believe. Ask them, how did non-humans become human? They may never have even stopped to think about that. How did non-living matter become alive? They may not have even stopped to think about that. It's a challenging question. And if you want me to believe it, show me the evidence. To believe in the general theory of evolution in the absence of God, you must believe the universe exploded from nothing. Life arose from non-living matter, and humans were either non-human and became human, or they were born from non-humans, and the universe is an accident with no purpose and no morals. Just break it down simply like that. You believe in the general theory of evolution, that means you believe nothing exploded, life came from non-living matter, humans came from some non-human, or they became human all of a sudden, and there's no purpose to anything and nothing matters because it's all just an accident. And then ask them, now is that what you believe? Did I quote you correctly? Is that what you want to go with? To believe in creation, you need to believe the universe was created by an all-powerful being. Life arose from a living being. That's what we call in science the law of biogenesis. In order to get life, you need life. How did we get life on earth? It came from a living being, an eternal living being. And the diversity of life comes from the variety of the creation. All this similarity between animals doesn't show evolution, it shows similar designer. Humans were created as humans, and life has a purpose. And that's to enjoy life and serve God. And why do we have morals, and where do we figure out what's right and wrong? Because that's what the Creator said was right and wrong. Which one makes more sense? Which one's more logical to believe? Creation, eternal Creator, life came from life, and justification for morals, or evolution, nothing exploded, non-living matter came alive, and there's no reason for anything. Which one do you want to go with? Just ask them that in a kind way. Which one do you want to go with? Because if you believe in evolution, that's what you believe. Nothing exploded, non-living matter came alive, and there's no purpose to anything. And there's no justification for your morals, including telling me I'm wrong for believing in religion. There's nothing wrong. If there's no religion, there's nothing that's wrong. And keep in mind that evolution is unproven. Just keep this in the back of your head. Don't ever get too discouraged. People sound really convincing when they're trying to bash theistic people and creationists and make them sound so smart. Don't forget that even evolutionists admit that it's unproven. Howard Jonathan, an evolutionist, said, all evolutionary reconstructions rest heavily on plausibility rather than evidence to command assent. Dr. Brian Charlesworth, an evolutionist, says, it is important to bear in mind, however, that we are usually so ignorant of the genetic structure of fossil populations and of the relations between environment, fitness, and morphology that we cannot provide explanations for any particular historical pattern of evolution. Professor Jerome Lejeune, an evolutionist, says, we have no acceptable theory of evolution at the present time. There is none, and I cannot accept the theory that I teach to my students each year. Let me explain. I teach the synthetic theory known as the neo-Darwinian one for one reason only, not because it's good, we know it is bad, but because there isn't any other. Whilst waiting to find something better, you are taught something which is known to be inexact, which is a first approximation. Pierre-Paul Grasset, an evolutionist, said, today our duty is to destroy the myth of evolution, considered as a simple, understood, and explained phenomenon which keeps rapidly unfolding before us. Biologists must be encouraged to think about the weaknesses and extrapolations that theoreticians put forward or lay down as established truths. The deceit is sometimes unconscious, but not always, since some people, owing to their sectarianism, purposely overlook reality and refuse to acknowledge the inadequacies and falsity of their beliefs. He also said, their success among certain biologists, philosophers, and sociologists notwithstanding, the explanatory doctrines of biological evolution do not stand up to an objective, in-depth criticism. They prove to be either in conflict with reality or else incapable of solving the major problems involved. And Dr. Lipson, finally, in Physics Bulletin, who is an evolutionist, said this, I've always been slightly suspicious of the theory of evolution because of its ability to account for any property of living beings. I have therefore tried to see whether biological discoveries over the last 30 years or so fit in with Darwin's theory. I do not think that they do. To my mind, the theory does not stand up at all. If you would like a free Bible correspondence course, then write us at Truth for the World, P.O. Box 241, Bethel Springs, Tennessee, 38315. The United States of America, or visit us online at truthfortheworld.org.
Ye servants of God, your Master proclaim, and publish abroad His wonderful